Whom do you admire? In 11th grade, I had to fill out a packet of get to know you questions for my dean in order for her to be able to write my recommendation letters. And one of the first few questions was about who I admire. I decided to skip that question and come back to it. I completed the whole packet and still didn't have an answer at the end, and I can't remember what I ended up putting down. I think something cliche. But this year, I finally found an answer, and her name is Jane Eyre. And yes, I know, she's a fictional character. Jane Eyre and I share a superpower. It's called metacognition, and awareness of one's thought patterns almost all the time. Like all superpowers, it has a shadow side, and I think that's best illustrated in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, where the main character and narrator's self-awareness becomes self-restraining. Jane Eyre's self-awareness, however, helps her to take control of herself and her own destiny. Her self-awareness allows her to balance passion with reason, personal values with ethical standards, comfort with growth, and her own needs with those of others. I was first going to title this video Jane Eyre, The Invention of the Human Mind, after Harold Bloom's Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. Because while Shakespeare created richly complex human characters in drama, Bronte has, through this novel, given birth to a human mind through a first-person narrative. What's amazing about this novel is that it spans so many life stages of a single human mind. Like any human, Jane is in one dimension ageless and in another ever-evolving. On the one hand, this is the same Jane's mind that we're following throughout the course of the novel. On the other hand, the Jane I got to know towards the end of the novel was quite different from the 10-year-old I met at the beginning. Her growth isn't neatly divided into childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. It evolves seamlessly throughout the novel, like staring in front of the mirror one day in high school and realizing you've grown this mustache and it's time for your first shave. And all of it, remarkably, is told through one consistent narrator's voice. As a metacognitor, Jane, like myself, is constantly attuned to her own thoughts, feelings, and judgments. She's aware of her conflicting thoughts and inner embattlements, and she has to make really tough decisions. And she does it, and it hurts the way that removing a band-aid hurts, but has to be done nonetheless. Again and again, she chooses throughout the novel to endure the pain of removing bandages that have to be removed, of breaking into uncomfortable shoes she has to break into. Not out of self-denial or self-castigation or self-abdication, but because she knows what she needs and what others around her need and how to balance the two. Jane Eyre has taught me that it's possible and necessary to respect yourself and others simultaneously, that loving oneself and loving others are not opposing acts, but complementary ones. Christianity runs throughout this novel, and Jane shows us that being true to God requires being true to oneself, that one cannot serve providence through self-erasure. I'm reminded of Mother Abbess's line in The Sound of Music, "My daughter, if you love this man, it doesn't mean you love God less." We applaud Jane Eyre because she cares deeply for herself and for others, because she creates space for her own imperfection and that of others, because she chooses what's difficult and painful and bears the suffering that follows, yet finds peace in knowing she did the best she could with honesty and heart, because she does not turn away from self-doubt or silence her remorse or regret, but honors them, gives them space, and still has the courage and faith not to let them hold her still. The decisions she makes are not actually why we respect her. They're questionable and up for debate. These are not black and white choices like whether Harry Potter should join the dark side or not. What earns our respect is her choice to see her own feelings and those of others not as enemies, but as fragile crystal balls to balance, polish, and carefully save for when they are most useful. She knows where it's her place to actively be God's servant and where it's her place to surrender and let go. She does her best and painfully but resolutely lets go of things she can't control. How did Jane become this way? It's a mixture of nature and nurture. She was born fierce and passionate, and you see that from the very beginning of the novel. But circumstances, even in childhood, forced her inward to observe herself, to survive by understanding her own mind. Solitude trained her to develop a relationship with herself, and over time, that self-knowledge became her strength. It's what allows her to face conflict, make painful decisions, and love in complex ways, because sometimes, as Jane shows us, love requires us to make decisions that might hurt parts of ourselves and our loved ones. The novel on the whole shows us that there's no one way to be in the world, even as a Christian. Different people are different because of the circumstances of their birth and their life. There are a couple of particularly important characters you'll meet, especially as you get close to the end of the book, who choose very different lives from the life Jane chooses for herself, and none of them are right or wrong. I also couldn't help thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in this novel as well. For a time period so heavily defined by social class, Jane Eyre's financial status and stability is all over the place throughout this novel. I couldn't help thinking of the line chart showing Friends' characters' financial journeys throughout the show and how sporadically those change. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs becomes relevant here because Jane's values, the things that are important to her, absolutely do change depending on her financial status. There's times when she's pursuing lofty ideals, and other times when she's fighting for her basic survival. But in times when she is financially secure, she's able to be generous, not out of self-denial, but out of a desire to ensure her rewards are best enjoyed by those who can best enjoy them. Jane Eyre reminds us that power begins with knowledge. Self-knowledge, that is.